You're listening to Technomics, connecting you to insights on digital transformation and the marketplace. The host opinions are their own. Enjoy the show.
We are back with a brand spanking new episode of Technomics. I'm so excited to be sitting in front of the microphone with a great crowd around the table today. I got Kurt Cornum with me.
Hey, Robin.
How are you?
Doing great. How about you?
I'm really good. And our guest today is Mr. Mike Gaumond. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you, Robin?
Doing very well. I've really been looking forward to this conversation, which is, kind of our case study wrap up of the infrastructure optimization season, because it's been a while and you almost get a chance to reflect a little bit on some of the conversations we have had since we last got to sit down. And we actually did some interesting surveys between the last time we recorded and today. So the Insight Intelligent Technology Index was actually recently released. And the focus of some of our conversation today, which is going to take us to hybrid cloud, real-time business, and intelligent networking, all of those topics are wrapped up in some of what we checked out with the survey. So I'll give you a couple data points to respond to. I respond to emotion, other people respond to numbers. But so we want to speak to all of our audiences. So something we saw was that legacy infrastructure is still a huge barrier for a number of organizations. They are worried about the kind of disruption that it can bring to the business in terms of failure, but also worried about the kind of disruption that can come to the business in terms of implementing cloud. And about a third of respondents said that they were concerned that implementing cloud services would be too disruptive to their organization. And another 59% of the personnel that we interviewed said that they believe that their data environment is safer after investing in cloud services. So you really have a great two sides of the coin conversation filling up the pro and con lists for getting into a on-prem, off-prem hybrid model.
Absolutely. I think a lot of technologies are that way. I think Mike might have been the one that told me that, a lot of technologies are overhyped in the short term and then they're underhyped in the long term. And I think we've surely seen that with cloud. And I think some of the concerns around security now have actually kind of flipped on their head, and folks are looking at some of the security features that are actually inherent in some of the public cloud offerings. So it's interesting, but I think, as we have the conversation today, we're going to realize that it's not an either or type of situation, that we live in a hybrid world in more ways than one. And I think that includes the compute environments that we're going to have in most organizations as we move forward as well. So definitely interesting times. And I think, infrastructure optimization is an important part of it, because it really drives the things we've talk about a lot with our clients, which is how do they help enhance the engagement they're having with their customers, and then how do they really enable their future and current workforce as well. And those are important aspects, but you've got to have the infrastructure in place to make that happen today. So it's an important part of it, and interesting times for sure.
I mean, we're all nodes on the network, right?
We are, yes, and probably multiple nodes these days, as it turns out.
Hopefully my meaning in life is slightly deeper than a node
than a node, being known as a node.
So oversimplified. So with all of that in mind, I'd love to start talking about some of the real deal conversations and actual projects that we've been able to help clients through in terms of getting their hybrid cloud into place and really benefiting their organization without too much disruption. Leveraging real-time business in order to better engage and enable the workforce, and also using intelligent networking to help optimize large organizations and handle workload. So, Mike, pick your poison. Do you want hybrid cloud, real-time business, or intelligent networking?
You kind of led off with the hybrid cloud, so maybe we should start there.
Sounds like plan.
So, Mike, I have a question, if I could jump in around, not a specific solution, but some of the things that, because I know you go visit a lot of clients, and some of the things that are actually driving them. What are the market drivers? What are the client challenges that they're having that they're saying, we think that there's a better solution than having us build it all on-prem? What are some of the realities that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd point to a few things. First, back to your prior comment. There was definitely an irrational exuberance phase for public cloud when everybody started thinking the whole world's going to migrate to public cloud. Nothing's going to be left in private cloud. Then the pendulum kind of started swinging back the other way when people were getting these huge bills for public cloud and saying, wait, this is pretty expensive. And the reality is setting in now that almost every client we talk to is going to have some amount of private cloud that they keep on premise, whether that's their own data center or a colo, and some amount of workloads up in the public cloud. But from a business driver perspective, what I really see clients struggling with is that their legacy infrastructure is not enabling the kind of business agility that a hybrid public-private cloud solution could enable. And specifically, I'm talking about creating the capability for their business to be able to do things like launch a new product faster than they've done in the past, or enter a new market more quickly, or integrate an acquisition more seamlessly than they have in the past. So that's what's driving companies to make that investment, is the business pressure to compete more effectively than they ever had in the past.
Another notable stat we got from the survey was that nearly half of respondents have migrated more than 50% of corporate application workloads to private cloud, and yet that still leaves the other half somewhere sitting on site.
Yeah, even if you believe the probably more aggressive projections for public cloud growth, there will be a significant portion of infrastructure that remains in a private cloud environment for at least another 5 or 10 years would be my bet, and what most of the analysts are saying. So where that leads is that a lot of our clients are wrestling with which of my workloads and applications should I keep in public cloud and which ones should I keep in private cloud, and how do I think about that in some sort of objective fashion?
And how do we think about it?
Right. And isn't it really, I'm sorry, Robin, isn't it really Mike driven? It seemed like before, or initially folks were looking at it as a cost savings measure, right? They thought, hey, it's a way I can scale my organization. I don't have to buy hardware that I don't use. But it seems like it's really changed now. It's much more around how does it help me transform my business? How does it help me be more agile, like you spoke to before? Not that cost isn't a criteria, but the whole moving from CapEx to OpEx, which seemed to be the original driver, I think is maybe it's anecdotal, maybe there's data behind it, has taken a bit of a back seat to just the fact that people want to have that kind of agility. They want to have that kind of flexibility, be able to move quicker to the market, which seems to be changing. Like you mentioned, Robin's changed since the last time we've had a conversation.
Yeah, cost still matters, so our clients care about that, and they're balancing the cost of public and private. But you're right, it's really about what's the right infrastructure for me to deliver the agility that my business client is requiring or demanding.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to hear about a solution that we actually got to deploy around hybrid cloud and how that's changing some of the outlook for our Insight client.
Subscribe to Insight's digital magazine, The Script Quarterly, and receive in-depth feature articles decoding today's IT trends. Each issue showcases original content with answers to your technology questions and an in-depth exploration of business technology headlines. Visit insight.com/quarterly to subscribe today. Insight, intelligent technology solutions that go beyond IT.
All right, and we are already back to hear about how we actually put hybrid cloud to work in a really pretty interesting example. So, Mike, share with us how we were able to help a business transform with some hybrid cloud approaches.
Happy to. The client here is an independent Coca-Cola bottler. And they faced a couple of real business challenges, right? I framed this all as business agility. So their business challenges were, first, they were trying to drive significant organic growth in the business. And second, Coca-Cola Inc., the company that makes all the products we know and love, has decided that bottling is not their core competency, and they're exiting that part of the business, and they're selling those assets to independent bottlers like our client. Now, the challenge our client had was that their legacy IT infrastructure wouldn't allow them to add in that new capacity from the parent company and drive the kind of organic growth that they were trying to achieve in the business. So the IT infrastructure was becoming the long pole in the tent for growing the business. So we helped them, and we started by taking an assessment-driven approach. So we look at their infrastructure, their Active Directory environment, their network, and then even their applications and workloads, and help understand what their starting point is in order to develop a roadmap for them. And as part of that, we assess their applications and workloads from a strategic, a functional, and a technical perspective. And we do that through some proprietary digital discovery tools we have, coupled with running workshops at the client location. And one of the interesting outputs we create for that is a roadmap for our clients for where those workloads should land in a new hybrid world. And we put them into one of 4 buckets. So the first bucket is, this is an application and workload that we believe makes sense to keep on premises in a private cloud environment. The second category are applications that should be re-architected for an infrastructure as a service or platform as a service environment. The third category are applications we believe they should replace with a standard SaaS, software as a service offering. In other words, there's a better off-the-shelf tool out there you can use. And the fourth important category are ones they should retire or end of life. And by starting with the applications and the workload, we can then develop a roadmap for their infrastructure on both the public and the private side and help them put that in place. And for this particular client, we're in the midst of implementing that infrastructure, and it's going to allow them to triple the capacity of their business from about a $500 million to a $1.5 billion company in 18 months.
Yowza.
So that's pretty transformational.
Absolutely.
Really impressive.
I think that's the kind of agility that we talked about earlier, right? Is that ability to be able to move your business that quickly, which would be almost impossible to do if you had to try and do that all on-premise.
Not only all on-premise, but even with a traditional premise kind of fragmented legacy environment, if you have a true private cloud with converged or hyper-converged stacks and automation and orchestration, it is so much more rapid for you to support the change in the business side.
Yeah, that's a good point. It isn't necessarily location dependent. It's what kind of automation orchestration tools you're bringing to bear just to make you much more agile from an operational standpoint as well.
And I mean, when you talk about business outcomes, at the end of the day, the ability to move fast is becoming a part of the DNA. It's thrive or die, which seems a little bit harsh, but I think you look at some of the examples that are out there of people who were running organizations that didn't believe that they were technology companies, and versus some of their competition who felt that at their core they were a technology company or were becoming a technology company, and the results are pretty radical.
I get the opportunity to spend a lot of time with our clients, and in the last 5 years, I can't think of a single client who didn't say that their competitive environment was more intense than it was in the past. The pace of change is faster than it's been in the past. The ability to attract and retain the right kind of talent in their organization is more difficult than it's ever been in the past. So, the market's getting tougher, not easier.
Dare I say business has become real time.
Which, in a sense is kind of code for the Internet of Things, which real-time business, I think folks can kind of wrap their head around what that means. The Internet of Things, I think, means a lot of things to other folks. But it's interesting, the connection between what we just talked about and from a hybrid cloud environment, because a lot of the real-time business solutions that we see today run on platforms. It's folks may not get that unless they've started to kind of go down that path around how do they use these sensor-enabled products and the the analytics-driven data that's coming from that it's really lends itself for a platform-based solution, which kind of by definitions means you're going to be in a hybrid environment. So exactly what Mike had just talked about really plays into the real-time business piece, but there's a whole nother set of technologies that are being brought to bear, and it's really around getting data off of things that we wouldn't have necessarily gotten them off of. And I think a lot of times around real-time business, folks are saying around IoT when it first came out, the hype, right? Because it was some folks say it's still at the top of the hype cycle. But, a lot of folks said, hey, this is nothing new. We've been, pulling analytics and telemetry off of things for quite some time. But there is a difference now in the way that it's being done and the scale that it's being done today. So pretty interesting. And Mike, I know you've had a chance to talk to a lot of clients around, some of the reasons that they're driving to try and make their business more real time. And I know it's around a couple things that we've talked about. Can you maybe elaborate on not the specific solutions, but some of the business benefits? What's really driving these folks to try and get information that they just didn't have before?
Yeah, the key thing, and the reason we call it real-time business, is that our clients have historically driven their business through the rear-view mirror. So, and by that I mean they're looking at historical data, they're trying to extrapolate it into the future and make decisions about their business, and it's increasingly difficult given the pace of change. So the notion behind real-time business, and the reason we call our IoT solution real-time business, is to give our clients the capability to gather that sensor data and make decisions using that data in near real time so that they can compete more effectively in the markets they're in.
One of the things that we found in our Intelligent Technology Index was that about 50% of the respondents' companies are working towards implementing IoT solutions in their business. And you can see why they would want those advantages. I love the way you talk about it as looking at your business from the rear view mirror. And boy, is there ever a time for foresight. Right now is it. If you're looking behind but trying to address things out on horizons 1, 2, and 3, you're at a existential and metaphorical disadvantage because those things I can't even mash them up.
I'm not sure about existential, I can't even say it, but there are some examples of real-time business solutions that revolve around predictive maintenance. And it's an interesting area because there's a lot of value to our clients. And we have to take a break here, but when we come back, we're going to have Mike talk to us about a real-life client example where they've been able to sensor-enable their devices and take advantage of the Internet of Things to supercharge their predictive maintenance.
For IT professionals, it's nearly impossible to find and explore all the important business technology headlines, but it's critical to stay informed of the latest IT trends. Get IT news worth sharing and subscribe to Insight's newsletter, The Script. You'll receive weekly industry articles curated from great sources from across the web and stories on intelligent technology to keep you up to date. Visit insight.com/subscribe to sign up today.
Hey, thanks for staying with us through the break. Let's deep dive into our discussion around predictive maintenance. Mike, I know you have an example that you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, happy to do so. So this client is a manufacturer of complex mechanical systems and products that their commercial and industrial customers use. And the challenge they've had is that historically these products aren't very smart. They perform their function and that's about all they do. And it led to some real challenges. They had unpredictable outages, so their system would go down with very little warning, would cause expensive maintenance for them and an outage for their customer. Or they would actually do unnecessary maintenance that they just scheduled based on time, and that cost them money, and they were maintaining equipment that didn't need to be maintained. So we helped them develop an IoT real-time business solution, and we put sensors and transmitters on each one of these systems at each of their client locations. And what that would do is that each sensor and transmitter would gather 60 data points every 15 seconds, and the transmitter would send that to a gateway somewhere in the client's building. That gateway would then securely upload the data via the internet to the cloud, and we would wrap analytics around that data and then put that back in the hands of the customers in near real time. So what that would enable them to do is things like they could see a map of the United States, and on that map of the United States, they could see a count in each major city where they had systems deployed, how many systems were there. They could double-click on a city and see how many systems were deployed within that city. For example, we're here in Phoenix, so they could see that there were perhaps 500 of these in the city of Phoenix. Then they could go to a specific customer of theirs and see how many units were deployed in that specific building. And across all those views, they could see how many units were on the network, how many were operational, how many had generated alerts. And if need be, they could actually double click on a unit and drill into that specific system and get information like what does the power consumption look like? What does the performance efficiency look like? How well is that unit working? Are there any alerts that's being generated? And they could actually automatically issue a trouble ticket and dispatch a technician if there was maintenance required on that unit. So imagine now that our client or their distributors and dealers or their end customers having visibility to this information in near real time and being able to make decisions. And what it did is actually significantly reduce their annual maintenance cost and simultaneously increase customer satisfaction because the customers weren't experiencing the outage. And the transformational piece here is what we actually help them switch from schedule-based maintenance to condition-based maintenance. And by condition-based maintenance, we mean deciding to do maintenance on a unit based on the condition it was actually operating in at that particular point in time, not based on an arbitrary schedule.
I was just thinking about my car, because my car probably needs maintenance. And I wish that I weren't looking at a sticker in the top part of my windshield and that maybe I could get an alert on my phone, and how applicable and transformational that would be for my own purposes.
A lot of cars are actually building in the capability to do exactly that now. So they monitor all this, and instead of having to go back to the dealer to have them check, and plug in and see what's going on, they send it to your phone, to your email, to your text message, that here's the daily, weekly, monthly status of your vehicle, and if there's service required, they might encourage you to go get the service done proactively to allow you to schedule it.
It's a great example of these devices and things that they generate a ton of information, but they tend to be isolated and disconnected from the network, and that's the change that we're going to see over the next few years, where many more things are going to be connected, and the new normal, so to speak, will be for us to have that kind of information at our fingertips, and it will change our lives in a lot of ways for the better, I think.
I think so too. All right, so from smart things to intelligent networks. Intelligent networking is another solution that has been a big part of the discussion for us recently, helping our clients understand how to get to unified branches, right? You've got a lot of examples of businesses that, if you go back a couple of seasons and listen to the hilarity that was the episode around the Olive Garden breadsticks, I think it pretty well sums up the experience that Unified Branch tries to create. So let's dig in a little bit here. What is in this solution, and why is it so valuable for clients working towards optimized infrastructure?
Well, I'll take a stab at that, because it's interesting that there's a ton of disruption we hear out in the world today, especially around retail. And when you kind of think retail, you think branches in a lot of cases. But it isn't just a retail play like we think of, like a retail store or something like that. For a lot of companies, the branches are the lifeblood of their business. That's where their brands come to life. That's where they engage their customers. That's just and especially around the services business. There's a lot of examples of, and not just the product side, but the services business. So when we started looking at that and looking at that disruption, it doesn't mean that they're not being disrupted. There's a different type of a disruption that they're going through, and it's around the competitive nature of some of the stuff we've already talked about, of where their competitors are more agile than they used to be. They're trying to engage their customers in a more meaningful way. They're dealing with a workforce that is transforming in front of their eyes in terms of the expectations that they have when they show up for work. So all of those things really play into what we kind of coined the unified branch environment, which was, how do you take an environment that was probably typically or traditionally what I called bandwidth starved and technology deprived, and how do you transform that into a place where people can actually come and have an experience that they really enjoy, and that the workforce that there is enabled in a way that they can provide that experience to the folks that show up. So it's an area that a lot of that we've put a lot of focus on because a lot of our clients are in that environment. We're trying to help them move their businesses forward.
And Mike, what is a great example of how we actually went and did this? Like, what's the real life application of that super satisfying customer and workforce experience through intelligent networking?
So a great example is a client of ours that runs nearly 1,000 animal hospitals across the United States. And they've grown quickly, both organically, and they grow a lot through acquisition. And they had a challenge that they were unable to integrate acquisitions quickly enough and get everyone onto a common platform so they could deliver those services to their customers and their workforce. So we helped them at nearly 1,000 branches to upgrade their infrastructure, their route switch network infrastructure, as well as their endpoints. So the thin client devices that their employees and even their customers in the office use. And we did that in a period of a few months to upgrade across nearly 1,000 locations. And they've been able to not only now integrate their new acquisitions much more quickly than they ever could in the past, but their workforce has a much more robust set of tools, for example, to schedule patients and to track the outcomes with the animals and to communicate back to their customers on a regular basis. So it's actually had a big impact on their business.
It's interesting. I think you shouldn't underestimate the bandwidth requirements these days. You know, we're all hyper-connected. We talked about all these new things that are also being connected. And I think you mentioned we're all nodes on a network. And there's a lot more of those nodes these days. And we actually had a client that was just running into bandwidth problems, and they weren't sure where that was. And as it turns out, it's Mike and I have had this conversation, was they had some folks at work there were coming in, and every morning they would come in and fire up a streaming radio program on their work machines. And if you do the math, it only takes about 5 workers to do that in a typical branch environment to really exhaust all the branch bandwidth. So they try rolling out a new mobile app. It works great in the lab. They roll it out to the branches and they start having issues with it. And it's because they actually have workers who just expect to be able to stream music because that's the age that they're at, that they, that's like listening to the radio was, 20 years ago. And so interesting environments that we're in, and that's why the infrastructure plays a huge role in how do you help enable your workforce and provide a better customer experience. That infrastructure has got to be in place to do that.
So we blocked all radio on their network except for Technomics.
Exactly.
Well played.
Yes.
We do a story around this almost every year around March Madness, which is definitely a seasonal moment and something that's a little bit near and dear to my heart, especially this past year. Goes Eggs. That's one where there's a Thursday and Friday where everything's just going to go off a cliff, because everybody's trying to get the latest update. And even if they're just trying to get the scores coming through, there's so much happening on ESPN or CBS Sports or whoever you're collecting the game times from. It's a lot of data, and people expect to get it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Somebody showed me, we were out, and they showed me an app on their phone. It was for their kids' Little League game, and they were getting information in real time. And so it isn't even it isn't just the big guys in the March Madness anymore. There is data being streamed in real time for events and things that you just wouldn't think about. And it's creating huge demands on the infrastructure that we probably didn't even envision a few years ago.
Some of the things that we do in our own organization, where we have teammates across the country and even across the globe, we do a lot of live streaming. And if you haven't had a chance to participate I really encourage you to get out on insight.com and check out some of the conversations that we have. They're lengthier. We have a bigger cast of characters. It's a lot of fun. But events like that, we do our corporate events to make sure that we get all of our teammates enabled with the information, and they get to hear Mike, maybe not live and in the flesh, but they get to see him and they put the face with the name.
Right.
It is a great way to enable the workforce, but it takes a very big pipe.
Right, and I think all the 3 things we talked about today around the hybrid cloud and the real-time business and then the intelligent networking, they're all part of the same story, right? You don't have one without the other. They're actually kind of all feeding each other and enabling our clients in different ways, but they're very complementary. And so it isn't like you're doing one and not doing the other. It's really a kind of a holistic story that's out there for folks to understand how to improve their business. So.
Well, that's going to do it for us. This is the final episode in this season, so we're very excited because next season we're talking about operational excellence, which is just like a wide open field at the moment. And I'm sure that we will fill it, and I'm sure that we will be talking about how to drive costs out of operations. I'm sure that we will be talking about how to transform for tomorrow, and I'm sure that we will have some great voices like Mike Gaumond and like Kurt Cornum joining us back here on Technomics. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Robin.
Thanks for listening to Technomics. If you want to find more episodes, you can download the podcast from iTunes, Google, or your favorite podcast provider. And for more stories on intelligent technology, visit insight.com.